Good morning. I hope you're having a nice day so far. Hope you enjoyed Melbourne, of course. Love Melbourne. I've asked the captain if we could turn back. He said no. I did try to slash your tyres. I almost achieved it, actually, with one tour. Yeah, there was that wine tasting tour that came back late. Thank you. You weren't late enough. But I was really counting on you. Anyway, I've got some photo challenge photos to show you. Now, I don't know about these photo challenges. Every time I ask you to take a picture of something, it's gone. I asked you to take a picture of the big prawn gone. I asked you to take a picture with the big cuddly donut gone. So, today's photo challenge is please take a photo of the dirt on the hull. However, some of you still tried, and I appreciate the efforts. Here's Jim in a Daniel's Donuts hat. And our other contender is Leslie with the donuts themselves. But this I love. She got a letter. This is like me when I got out of sports at school. I got a letter. Congratulations, you're the first to ask, but we don't have the plush donut anymore. But that, in my mind, is a certificate. Your prize might be the certificate. Donuts, yeah. Alrighty, let's chat Tasmania. We'll start with the flag. By the way, when we get to Sydney, did you win? Well, you didn't get a certificate from them, so I feel you came second. Aww. Well, we can say joint first. You maybe were the first person in the other shop. I went to one. I should have put my picture up. Yes. Oh, well, another time. I also went and took my picture outside without a cuddly toy. It's not the same without the cuddly toy, by the way. But we're gonna, when we get to Sydney, we're gonna have completed our round of the states and territories of Australia. And we haven't obviously been to the capital in Canberra, which is its own territory. But apart from that, we'll have seen the lot. And so I'll put all of the flags on one screen as well, so you can see them again all together as a collection. But this is Tasmania. There's no real reason why they have a lion in their flag. There is nothing that Tasmania and lions have in common, and there is no official reason recorded anywhere as to why this ended up being the flag of Tasmania. Some people think that maybe it was a way of the people who designed it showing their loyalty to the British Crown at the time because of the lions and the connection with the UK. Maybe it's that, but there's no official documentation to say that that is the case. Maybe they just liked lions. Anyway, there's currently a bit of a movement in Tasmania to redesign the flag. So maybe that could be our next challenge. Instead of a photo challenge, we could do a flag design challenge. But perhaps if we were to do that, we would maybe do a flag for the cruise, as in a Grand Australia and New Zealand on the Volendam flag. If you would like to get your creative juices flowing, then you can run with that mission. But I would be personally surprised if they get some of the flags through, just because the designs that they're currently being put together as suggestions for this redesign are so different from all of the other state flags, and all of the other state flags have this very consistent structure. We'll see. But this is something which there's some murmurings in town about this. The population of Tasmania is small. It is 550 540, it's even smaller, 541,071 people. That's in the entire state. So very, very small compared to where we've just been. And if you wanted to refer to the locals, you could call them Tasmanians, but there are some other words that you might want to use as well. Heathens. Sorry, not heathens. Taswegians. Knew it rhymed. Taswegians. I don't know why, some connection to Glasgow maybe. Or Vandemonians. Vandemonians. That's a sort of a joke back to the old name for Tasmania, because it used to be Van Diemen's Land. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I like to tell you if there's a particular state animal that is of note, and I couldn't find one for Tasmania. Of course, it is the Tasmanian devil. The Tasmanian devil. And this is the only place on earth that you will find it. I'll talk more about the Tasmanian devil in today's session. So back on the map, just so you can see where we've got to, we are now right at the very bottom. This is as south as Australia goes, the largest island of Australia, Tasmania. And it's named after the Dutch explorer Abel Tasman, who was huge in this area. We're going to be talking quite a bit about Abel Tasman over the next little bit of our cruise. He's got a lot of things named after him, including a sea, which we are now sailing on, and an island, Tasmania. Now, he was the first reported European. He was the first European who sighted this island, and he therefore had the pleasure and the honor of naming it for Europeans anyway. It already had its own name, but he gave it a name, and he did not give it the name Tasmania. He did not name it after himself. He named it Van Diemen's Land after his sponsor, the person who paid for his expeditions, Anthony Van Diemen. And so this was his nod of recognition to the person bankrolling his adventures around the world. So he called it Anthony Van Diemen's Land. When the British turned up, they shortened it and they called it Van Diemen's Land. But it stayed Van Diemen's Land for quite a long time. And then it was officially renamed in 1856. And at that point, it was renamed to honor the first European to step foot here, and it was named Tasmania. So from that point on, it's been Tasmania, but Van Diemen's Land, you'll still see a few references to that here and there. Now, the state capital and the largest city on the island is Hobart, which is where we will be visiting first. And about 40% of the population of Tasmania live in Hobart, which makes it Australia's most decentralized state. Every other state that we have been to, the majority of people have lived in the capital city. But that's not the case here in Tasmania. The majority of people do not live in the capital city. It's the southernmost city of Australia, and it is at the south of the island, which makes sense. It was permanently settled by Europeans in 1803 as a penal settlement of the British Empire. And the reason why it was so important to them, or why they felt it was so important to them to colonize this island quite far off the coast of Australia, was they were concerned about the French, which is very understandable. The French were also looking to colonize this part of the world, and having dealt with the Dutch, the British didn't want to have to then deal with the French. So preventatively, they were extending the reaches of the Australian colonies, as they were at the time, to protect against a potential French invasion. And that way they went west into South Australia, and they went south into Tasmania. During this time, there were a fair number of local wars, not against the French, because they were put off, but against the Aboriginal communities in these lands, and they are known now as the Black War. And so that's, you'll see if you go to the museum here, you'll see a lot of references to this, and thousands of Aboriginal people were killed in this period, both through military conflict, but also through disease. And between those two, the population was almost wiped out. It really took a huge hit. It was roughly 3,000 to 7,000, estimates sort of vary, but 3,000 to 7,000 people lived on the island before the British arrived, and that really went right down into the hundreds. It was originally part of New South Wales, as was most of the British colony of Australia at first, and then individual areas started being granted self-government, and so things started to get their own names and whatnot there. But this was a huge penal colony. This was one of the best, or one of the worst, depending on how you want to look at penal colonies. 80,000 convicts were sent to this relatively small island south of Australia. It was the main place that people got dumped. This ceased in 1853, so that was running until 1853 from 1825. So in that period, 80,000 convicts were dropped here. In 1901, it became a state of Australia as part of the Federation of Australia, along with the other states. We're going to talk about convicts a fair amount today, especially when we get to the Port Arthur part of today's talk. But let's talk Hobart first. Here is a photograph of Hobart Port. There's no ship in, but you can see the building. That stays there even when the ship isn't in. And it's very easy to get into town. It's a short walk across the road and you're almost there. In terms of what the port provides us itself, then there's Wi-Fi in the port. There's a small market. Taxis wait outside, and there are toilets too. Here it is on a map. So you can see that the ship is there at... I put it on berth 2. Chances are we'll be at berth 2, but we'll be able to confirm that in the morning. And the CBD area is the part in the blue square, as usual. It's roughly just over 1 kilometre walk in. Give it 20 minutes, and you're in the centre of the CBD. And most of the local sites are within that sort of roughly 20-minute walk. There are some things further away as well, but you could have a really wonderful day in Hobart without going too far. It is the smallest in terms of the capitals, but actually it's great for that because it's like a mini Sydney, because they were built at the same sort of time. It's the second oldest city in Australia after Sydney, and so you get much of the same influences coming through. On one side is the Derwent River. Behind it is Mount Wellington. In front of it is the sea. It's a really beautiful place to live. But it didn't have much money. And that was a good thing, I think, for us, because it meant that it managed to avoid mass development. A lot of cities got this huge influx of money, and suddenly all of these glass towers were shooting up everywhere, and all of the nice old buildings were being knocked down. But it's not the case here. There's actually a lot of really lovely Georgian buildings, and you can go on a nice sort of self-guided walk through town, get some beautiful pictures. You really feel like you've stepped back in time. It's a great place. But it wasn't really a tourist place. People didn't come here. It was actually sort of a bit of a backwater of Australia. It didn't have a great reputation. But then in 2010, something big happened. And it's happened in a few places around the world. And it's got a name, actually. The name of it is called the Bilbao effect. Has anybody heard of this term, the Bilbao effect? A couple of people. Has anybody been to Bilbao in Spain? Have you been to the Guggenheim Museum? Before the Guggenheim Museum popped up in Bilbao, Spain, nobody went to Bilbao in Spain. Suddenly, this one really important, significant cultural site and everybody's interested to go. The economy of the local area picks up because of this one thing that's drawing people in, but everyone else steps up to meet that. And it got a name. It got the name Bilbao Effect. Well, the exact same thing happened here in Hobart. And a museum popped up in 2010 called Mona. And, not that sort of Mona. M-O-N-A. The Museum of Old and New Art. And it is closed on Wednesdays. Which is gutting. I have not included it in my top 10 for that reason, but just to give you a very quick idea of it, it's a very strange art museum. It is not like any art museum you've ever visited, and it just made such a splash. This art museum is slashed into the rocks. It is not a traditional viewing experience. It's, in the words of the person who built it, it is a subversive adult Disneyland. Iconoclastic and shocking. And it really got people talking. If you come back to Tasmania, do not come on a Wednesday. And let's get into our top 10 of things that are open on a Wednesday. This is the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery. It's free to visit. It is the National Museum and Gallery of Tasmania. And as you can see, it's a very short walk from the ship, 600 meters. You go out of the port area, and you're basically on the first road out. You turn left, and then you're there. It was established in 1846, so it's got a long history, by the Royal Society of Tasmania, which is the oldest royal society outside of England. So it does show you the history and age of this place as a colony. But actually, the probably more interesting thing when you go in here is they've got an exhibition about colonization, but from the perspective of the Aboriginal people. And it's called Our Land, Parawa Parawa, Go Away. And it's just taking it from a different perspective. You can also learn about the Tasmanian tiger in this museum. The Tasmanian tiger went extinct in 1936, so you're not going to see one alive, but you can see one skinned, which is just as good. It went extinct, as I said, in 1936, and that was in captivity. So even before the final one died in Hobart Zoo, they'd already been on a fairly significant decline. This is the Maritime Museum of Tasmania. This is a private collection here, and therefore you do have to pay to go in, $15. But the reason I like this museum is there's a particular statue here which just makes me laugh. I'm going to tell you about the statue in a minute, but I'll tell you why it's significant first. It is the oldest known freestanding full-length statue in Australia. It is 1.3 meters tall, and it's a man urinating. And this is not the first man urinating you've seen on this itinerary, because many men forget to lock the door. No, it's not the first sculpture of a man urinating you've seen on this itinerary. Did anybody spot the other one? No. Yes? Fremantle. Fremantle has a metallic man urinating over you as you walk underneath him on the streets. I don't know why. But anyway, you managed to escape him. This one's more interesting in terms of the story behind it. And by the way, it is a functionally plumbed man urinating. So he really does urinate. And oftentimes we think of statues being designed to memorialize somebody in a good way. To put somebody up on a pedestal, literally, and say, this is the person we want to remember. This is the person who stands for what we stand for. Well, I'm not sure it was quite the case in this one. I think that this is a bit of a mocking statue. It's of, we think, and this is, there's like guesswork here, Lieutenant Governor George Arthur. It is an unidentified man, but every historian that sort of researched it thinks that it's this lieutenant governor, and people assume that it's something of a political statement about his contributions to society. Anyway, that's what's worth going to see in this museum. If you're interested in space, then you might go to Mount Pleasant. There is a radio telescope observatory in Mount Pleasant. It's actually part of the University of Tasmania, which is in a place called Cambridge, which makes me smile. There are a few universities in places called Cambridge. There's Cambridge, then there's Harvard in Cambridge, and now there's this one in Cambridge as well. There's a museum here called the Grote Reber Museum. Grote Reber is the father of radio astronomy. So he's credited with being the first person to build a big dish antenna, one of these really ugly monstrosities. And by using radio waves to see into space, he was able to map space in a way that hadn't been achieved before his time. And he mapped a band of radio emission from the Milky Way. And so that was what sort of gave him his big name. And now you can go to see the dishes here. There are 3 of them. Tours are available as well, but get in touch with them in advance if you want a tour. Use their website there or the QR code, because they run the tours. It's very reasonably priced for the tour, $5.50. They like to do it for a group of 10. So if you're interested, see if you can get 10 together, because otherwise they'll charge you as if you were 10. But if you go more than 10, then it's $5.50 per person. It is the price. And if you just want to walk around the site, you don't need to arrange a tour. But I'm sure a tour would make it particularly interesting. Or you could go to prison. The Hobart Convict Penitentiary. The bail here is 35 Australian dollars. There's a memorial inside. There's a gallery of portraits of some of the people who were locked up here. It was originally used as the prison barracks. Now, because it was a convict, a penal colony, the prisoners built their own places. That's one of the oddities of the way this whole system worked, is that the prisoners built their own prison, which I find odd that more of them didn't escape, because if I was building my own prison, I would definitely build an out. Anyway, maybe there's a reason they were a prisoner. The thing that I found very, very interesting when I was researching the prisoners who came here is I have always assumed that the prisoners were rough and gruff men. But about 10 to 12% of the prisoners that were transported to Tasmania were boys, aged between 10 to 12 years old. Yeah. And that really shocked me. That really shocked me. I thought that there would be adult crimes, but it wasn't. A lot of them were kids. And obviously women as well. But the one that really shocked me was how many children were brought over here. This is a very moving monument, the cenotaph, and then the Eternal Flame Memorial in front of it. Cenotaph, of course, as are in many places around the world, commemorating those who've given their lives in the wars, specifically World War I, World War II, but then other wars since as well. Every year, we mentioned this a little bit ago about Anzac Day. Anzac Day, big day in the Australian calendar. It's essentially the Memorial Day for the armed forces in Australia, whereas in the UK we use 11/11. Anzac Day is the day in Australia. And this Eternal Flame was unveiled as part of the 2015 Anzac celebrations. So this part is relatively new. And it's a beautiful park, actually, in the area. You see, you go about a kilometre away from the CBD area and just out of town, and you get beautiful gardens there, and the cenotaph statue, the Eternal Flame in front of it. Worth going to, and beautiful views as well whilst you're there. or you can go and get drunk. The Cascade Brewery is Australia's oldest brewery, and it's in the foothills underneath the mountain, Mount Wellington. Still operating, they're still making beer. They say it's still just as delicious as ever. And the building itself is an amazing building. It's strikingly tall. You don't sort of get the impression from the bit of the picture you can see, but the building now goes right down, and there's actually quite a few stories high. It's a fascinating story of how the building ended up being made and how the brewery came into being, because the person who opened the brewery was in prison. He was a convict. He came across from England not as a convict, but then it was found out that he had unsettled debts back at home that he had been escaping, and so he was put in prison in Tasmania to deal with that. And whilst he was in prison, he drew up the plans for his brewery, and then they started building it whilst he was still incarcerated, and then when he came out, he joined in the fun. You find out a lot more when you get there. Back in 1824, it opened. Also using the word Cascades, and by the way, the road is called Cascades Road that runs just out of town, is the female factory. Now, this is not where they made females. This is where they worked the females, and this was the female convict factory. And so, generally speaking, the female convicts were kept separate from the male convicts, but convicts, when it was a penal colony, were here to work. They didn't have their freedom, so every night they went back to prison, but they were here to work in the days, and so they were given different jobs depending on their particular skill sets and what they were deemed to be worth, and so this was a factory that was staffed by women convicts and girls. Remember the children as well. It wasn't just boys, it was girls as well. Very interesting place to visit, and there's again a fascinating gallery of inmates as well, and you can see some of the photographs there, and you find out even more information about them when you get there. And this is the mountain I'll keep talking about, Mount Wellington. Beautiful. It's amazing. It's taller than Table Mountain in Cape Town. So if you think of Cape Town, you picture that mountain overlooking it. This is 200 meters taller and looking over Hobart. That's a visitor centre at the top, which you can go to, get some great views from in there, and 7 till 10 are the opening hours of that visitor centre. The mountain remains open 24 hours. They found it hard to close a mountain. But actually this mountain has two names. This is something which is more common in New Zealand than it is in Australia. In New Zealand, what you'll notice is that there's been a real push to use Maori names for things. And so even the name of the country, there's a big drive to not call it New Zealand, but to call it Aotearoa New Zealand. Both parts of the country get represented in the name. And you'll see this quite a lot when we're in New Zealand. Not so much the case in Australia, but it is the case here. And so it has a dual name, and the mountain is called Kunanyi Mount Wellington. And Kunanyi is the Aboriginal name for the mountain. Mount Wellington is the English name for the mountain, but both serve as dual names rather than one being a translation. You could go and see the Tasmanian devil. The Bonorong Wildlife Sanctuary is probably the best place to go for that. Bonorong, by the way, means native companion, so that's how they picked their name for this sanctuary. It is not just the Tasmanian devil that you'll find there. They breed Tasmanian tree frogs, and they do breed Tasmanian devils as well, but you'll find pademelons, you'll find betongs, quolls, possums, emus, echidnas, wombats, potoroos, which I've never even heard of before. Loads of different animals here, and native to the area. How did the Tasmanian devil get its name? Because it's not a devil. It's a very, very lovely creature. It got its name because when the settlers arrived, they were disturbed in the night by an awful shrieking, howling shrieking of wild, rabid dogs. Sort of thing. I've been practicing that. I've got an impressionist show coming up. I can do the Tasmanian frog as well. They got the name because when they went out to find out what is this beast, they saw this tiny little thing with red ears. And they said it looks like a devil. And so that way it got the name Tasmanian devil. And you might think, well, but what is it? Well, it's clearly not a devil. What is it? Is it a dog? Because it's almost dog-like. And it's not a dog. It is not part of the canine family. Is it a rat? Because it looks a little bit rodent-like. But it's not a rat either. It's not a rodent. It is a marsupial. It is a relative of the kangaroo. A poor relative, but a relative nonetheless. It's the last surviving carnivorous marsupial. So kangaroos are lovely because they don't try and eat us, but Tasmanian devils love eating animals, and they are the last surviving marsupial who does. They do tours, by the way, so if you visited Bonorong, they're open from 9 till 5, but they do tours through the day. And from what I was able to find, there's a tour at 11:30, and there is a tour at 2. So if you want a bit of a guided tour, then good times to get there for. And finally, for Hobart, the red-decker ho-ho bus. And this is their hop-on, hop-off bus. It's an open-top bus, so I hope it doesn't rain. And it's a 90-minute city loop. So if you just stayed on it, you get 90 minutes. You go around all the main sites. But there are 20 different stops on this loop, so you might want to get off at some of them. And so this is a very convenient way to see all of the main attractions. It goes to the convict penitentiary if you wanted to go there. It goes to the Maritime Museum, the Cascades Female Factory. It goes to the brewery. It goes to the Aquatic Centre, which I didn't talk about. It goes to the Botanical Gardens, which again I didn't talk about. Victoria Dock, which I didn't talk about. There's lots of stuff here. There's lots more than just 10 things. It's a small city, but they've packed it with some stuff. It's a really good route if you're interested to take it. And it starts at the Travel Centre on the corner of Davy and Elizabeth Street. So basically head out of the ship and around the two dock wharfs there, which are the two sort of squares of protected water. And then after the second one, you'll see the visitor centre on the corner there. So that's where you want to go to pick up the bus if you are interested in that. Here's a map of Hobart zoomed out, and you'll be able to see the highlights, or my highlights at least, and the top 10 numbered there. 6, 7, and 8 just off the map, down Cascades, and that takes you to the mountain as well. Mount Pleasant is across the water, but there's a bridge. The Tasman Bridge goes across the water. Alrighty. Oh gosh, I've just realised I've made a mistake on the next slide. Can you believe it? I can. It says we're going back to Exmouth. I don't think that's true. Please ignore the word Exmouth. I corrected it on the next slide, but I appear not to have corrected it on this slide. I'm going to try and see if it lets me do it now, but it might not. Oh, it does! Look at this. Wow. That's clever. Thank you, thank you. I get applauded more for my mistakes than the things I get right. All right. With that, my family should be applauding me all the time. This is where the tender drops us off in Port Arthur. Now, Port Arthur is a tender port, so the ship will be a little bit out. It's not a particularly long tender journey in, but it just doesn't have the space for a cruise ship dock. So you see that the symbols are quite slim on this one. You've got an anchor, which means that we're tendering. So this is the tender port. And you've got toilet roll. And you don't go to the toilet in that hut, by the way. There's a tray. Well, no. Well, what they were hoping is that you'd have gone to the Maritime Museum in Hobart. It's stood off the edge of the jetty. There's a toilet at the end of the pier area. So if you do want the toilet after the tender ride, then pop there before you go into the area. Now, the basic Port Arthur site entry fee is 47 Australian dollars. You don't have to worry about that. We've covered that already. So you have access to everything on the site, and you don't need a separate ticket. That is part of our port fee. Port Arthur is one place, largely speaking. It's one town that is now a heritage site. And so it's a very interesting place to visit, not because there's a lot of variety there, the opposite. There's no variety there, but you get to go deeper. This is a time to really dig deep into the convict story and to learn about how convicts were tasked with building Australia and to just really dive deeper. So think of this day as a day of real immersion. And if you're trying to balance out, what do I do in Hobart and what am I going to leave for Port Arthur? Well, Port Arthur is 100% a convict day. So unless you're really fascinated to go even further, maybe don't do the penitentiary, the convict site in Hobart, because then you give yourself a balance over the 2 days in Tasmania. Or do it both days if you want to get even deeper. Here it is on a map. And you can see there we've got the ship. Then we tender into where the circle is. The circle is the tender pier. And then a short walk in gets you started. Now I've put it's a 2-minute walk. That's 100 meters. That gets you to the visitor centre. It will be a lot of walking. So don't be misled by the fact that I've put that it's 100 meters. It's 100 meters to start, and then you're going to spend the entire time walking. And so do keep that in mind. We're going to go through my top 10 highlights for Port Arthur, and I'm quite surprised I managed to find 10. But actually, there's a lot here. There are 30 buildings that you can visit. I will not be talking about all 30 because I see enough of you sleeping already. But I'll pick out a few and sort of give you a picture of what the day will look like. First of all, let's start with the visitor centre. The visitor centre is the thing that is closest to the ship, so 100 metres or so from the tender. It's on 2 levels, and there's a fair amount there. So don't walk past the visitor centre. This is the place to start your trip. You go into the visitor centre. On the ground floor, you'll find facilities, so restrooms, locker rooms. So if you find, I've brought way too much stuff, I really don't want to be lugging around a heavy bag because I've now realised, okay, Daniel said there was going to be a lot of walking. Now I understand what he meant. There's going to be a lot of walking. I've brought too much stuff. Pop it in a locker. So they've thought this stuff through. There's a photo gallery on the ground floor as well. Now, in the gallery, this is quite fun. You pull out a playing card. And that playing card, regular playing card, corresponds to a convict. And so then you go and find your playing card in the display, and you'll find out which convict you've pulled. And not pulled in that sense, but pulled the card. And then you can learn more about that person and their fate. It just makes it a bit more personal. I like that. There's a shop in there as well if you want to get a souvenir of your time in prison. You could also go on a cruise. They run 20-minute harbour cruises, which are really nice. On this boat here, so a smaller boat, and it's included in our entry. So definitely worth doing. hop on that boat, enjoy a tour around the harbour. You get some beautiful photographs because you then get some photographs back from different angles of the site. There are other islands as well. There's the cemetery is on a separate little island, and so I think the boat will go around the cemetery, and so you can see that part of the island. There was the young boys' island where there was a separate place for the children that were being locked up here. So you get to see a little bit more as part of that 20-minute harbour cruise. Well worth working into your day. And then on the main site, here are a few interesting buildings. And the way I've picked out which buildings to share with you, because as I mentioned, there are 30 that you can visit. Some of them have hosted talks at various points during the day. So I've drawn out those ones. And so the ones where there's going to be somebody who's got some level of expertise and knowledge will give talks about the site in the next few places that I'm going to talk about. So the commandant's house is where the chief lived. And obviously it's a particularly nice house. It's on an elevated position. It gets lovely views. It's a little bit away from the naughty people. And the thing I will advise is I've put the talk times down, but please check in the visitor centre for the schedule of talks for Wednesday, because they haven't put up a schedule for Wednesday. So what I've done is I've taken a previous day's schedule, a weekday schedule, and I am assuming that it will be roughly the same on Wednesday. But please check with them in the visitor centre, and it will be advertised just in case there are some slight changes to the schedule. But the commander's house was built in 1833, and it's surrounded by green. It's got a veranda. It's actually a very nice place to live, and it extended over the years as different commanders came in and had families and needed more space. And then one of them wanted a nice office, but the previous person had built a kitchen there, so they knocked down the kitchen, and he gets his office, and then they have to build a new block for the kitchens, and that goes further down. So it turns into this quite big, sprawling house, and it became a hotel. So when the settlement closed, that was in 1877, it was left to languish, and it became a little bit ruined, as did many of the buildings on the site. But it became a guest house, 1879. Then in 1885, it became the Carnarvon Hotel. And then there was a bushfire here. And the bushfire just ran right through the town. That was 1895 and again in 1897. Now, in this period, a lot of things were destroyed, including much of the Carnarvon Hotel. And so you can still see bits of the old building, then bits of it were rebuilt and restored. But you can see, when you walk around the commandant's house, you'll see elements where you're like, I see how this was a house, but you're going to see other elements where you get, this feels like a hotel, and that's why it feels like a hotel, because it was one. This is the main building, of course, the penitentiary. They had to build it themselves. The convicts built their own penitentiary, and it was originally constructed as a flour mill and a granary. So this was in 1843, and then it housed the convicts after that. So in the penitentiary, there were 136 separate cells on the bottom two floors. These were for the prisoners that were referred to as the lions. These were the badly behaved prisoners. So they had their own cells and stricter conditions, prisoners of bad character. And if you were one of those, you ate there, you slept there, but you still worked around the site in the daytime. But then there were other cells above the dining hall, and these were dormitory-style cells for better behaved criminals. So the better behaved criminals were upstairs in larger groups. They had a library, which was stocked with useful and entertaining books. They had a chapel there as well, and 480 beds. This is the junior medical officer's house. So this was a full village. Everything was considered here. It just didn't end up seeing through its life as a village. It didn't last, but it was intended to be a fully functional town. and this is where the junior doctor lived. It has twice been used as a hotel. In the early 1900s, it was known as the Tasman Villa, and from 1921 to 1959, it was known as Hotel Arthur, and it became the site of a movie. It's a movie before our time, but you might have heard of it. I don't know. It was in 1927, black and white movie called For the Term of His Natural Life. Meant nothing to me, but apparently they've made more than one Jurassic Park, and I didn't know that either. So anyway, the hotel finally closed in 1959, and now it's been somewhat restored into a site that's more like how it used to be. But again, you are still going to see some key signs that say this has been used for other purposes, and it has. They've tried a few times to turn this into something, and it never had. It never turned into something. And so what it turned into is what it always was, a convict heritage site. And it's now protected, and it's a registered part of the UNESCO Convict World Heritage Sites of Australia. Here's the convict church. It's lacking a roof, which meant that they were really singing their hymns well. It's actually an unconsecrated church. They never got round to consecrating it, largely because of internal factions. They couldn't agree on certain internal politics, and so it just never happened. They started building it in 1836, and the foundation stone was laid by the Lieutenant Governor, George Arthur, on his final visit to Port Arthur. And the port takes his name, Port Arthur, named after Lieutenant Governor George Arthur. It's a big church, though. It could accommodate 1,000 worshippers. And the convicts would have their own entrances, and the free settlers would have a separate entrance, and as they walked in, they were shielded from the convicts, so they could pray in peace. There was a separate prison. This was for the really bad nuts. So if you were too badly behaved for the main penitentiary, then you would be taken across to the separate prison. And the separate prison was influenced by a British prison called Pentonville, which is a notorious prison in the UK, and also by the American Philadelphia system, which you might be more familiar with. The idea of it was to remove physical punishments like beatings and lashings and replace them with torture, psychological punishment. And what they would do is they would isolate prisoners for 23 hours a day in total isolation. They would humiliate the prisoners, and it was all to do with intimidation and manipulation over here for the very worst. This is an alternative way of looking at the site, and this is the nice side of it. This is the government gardens, and all of the free settlers were given a plot to plant up a nice garden. And so you've got some lovely gardens and some beautiful walking paths to go through. But there's also a memorial garden here for a horrific mass murder that happened not when this was a penal colony, but in 1996. And it's still something which is painful for people who live here, because it's very much in living memory. And many of the locals were directly affected by this. About 30 people were murdered on one day, 28th of April of 1996, by a gunman who came in. He knew people. He was let into their houses, he just went on an absolute rampage. And there is a memorial garden for the victims of that event within this space as well. And there is some information there. One of the things which I think is interesting, and again, it connects in with New Zealand in my mind as well, because they do this as well. I think it's an excellent thing, and we don't do it so well in the UK. They won't name the gunman. They don't give him the light of day. It's all about the victims. And I remember New Zealand did that as well when there was a terrorist incident in New Zealand a few years ago, and they never named the person who did it. They only gave daylight to the victims. I think it's an interesting way of dealing with that. Anyway, guided tours are available as an extra. So if you've got your own tour with Holland America Line, then enjoy. But if you haven't got a tour and you're thinking, seems to be quite a lot to take in here, maybe I'd like to do it with a guide. There are some guides available, and you can engage their services at the visitor centre. So the range of prices is quite dramatic. They start at about $10 for a convict tour, 45 minutes, ranging to $350 for the Wheel of Fate tour, which is a 4-hour tour, but it includes lunch and drinks. So depends what you want. There's a tour that goes to the Isle of the Dead, which is the cemetery island, if you're interested in that. That you take the 20-minute cruise out, and then you have 40 minutes on the island as well. Final thing for today, I realise we've gone a little bit long on this one, the Port Arthur shuttle. Now, there's no hop-on, hop-off bus in the Port Arthur historical site, but there is, or certainly has previously been, a private tour run by a company called Tassie Tours, Tassie Tours, and this is a hop-on, hop-off bus out of Port Arthur to some of the other things in the area. There's not much in the area, so I think there are only about 5 stops, 2 of which are pubs, but you've got the Tasmanian Devil Unzoo, which is a nature experience up close with the animals. That's one stop. There's the Tasmanian Chocolate Foundry, which is a local chocolate company making the chocolates here in Tasmania. You've got Rosedale Homestead, which could be for lunch. Port Arthur Lavender, there's a big lavender farming business here, and you can visit there. They've got a nice gift shop and a visitor centre. You can walk around their gardens. And the Fox and Hounds Inn is a pub which does lunch as well. So if you wanted to get out of Port Arthur, then go to the visitor centre and ask about the Tassie Tours and see if they're running their shuttle. I wasn't able to find conclusive proof that they will be running it tomorrow, which is why I've put hours unknown and entry unknown, because I saw 2 prices. One was $27.50, one was $83. They seemed very different from each other, so unknown. Here's a map of Port Arthur for you, and I've put number 2 in the circle because you pick up the free harbour tours from the same place that the tender drops us off, so they are in the same jetty. Well, that brings us up to very much time, so thank you so much for coming, and we'll have our Q&As later today about Hobart, 3 o'clock and 7. See you there.